Hi there, and welcome to Three Rail Steve. And what I thought I'd do today is to go a bit more into how I construct the track using just Peco standard track, double O gauge, code 100, and for the middle rail, N gauge track. So I use these little metal tacks, and I drill a hole and I push them into the baseboard through the track and the cork underlay. So I'll just show you that. I'll make a very annoying drilling noise in a minute. Yeah, so just sort of in the middle, obviously just and then the tack, well, you can push it in almost with your fingers pretty much. You don't need to hammer it in. But it's a tight enough fit to be secure. So I'll just pop one of those in there. So the next task is to actually grind the top of the tack. So we'll take solder. So I just use a multi-tool for that, so with a little grinding attachment on the end of it. I'm just going to drill another hole a second. Just going to pop one in there. So you just need about two. And you don't want them too far apart. So the idea is to use pretty short sections of N-gauge rail, and each section will be attached to these, soldered to these tacks, and each section is joined using a N-gauge rail joiner with a little bit of a gap. And I've noticed that these bits of rail can actually distort quite badly. So yeah, with varying temperatures, they can actually sort of bend out of shape. So it's important to leave a gap, and the fish plates kind of take care of that. You can leave maybe a millimetre or two gap quite easily. And same applies, of course, to the actual double O gauge rail as well. So leave gaps, leave points for the rails to expand properly. So I'm just going to trim this bit of N gauge track up into a sort of shorter section. And I use this cutter, just going to measure it slightly against the track. Yes, this cutter gives a nice clean cut, so the fish plates just fit over the end. I don't have to do any extra filing or anything. So now I'm just putting a bit of flux on the top of these little tacks I've just folded down. And I'm using this very nice soldering wire that I've got from, I think it's DC Concept. You should be able to see it in the video, which works very nicely. It's a bit expensive, but it just makes everything a whole lot cleaner and easier to do. And you're only using the really very tiny amounts. You're not soldering the whole rail up. You're just soldering a few odd bits and pieces here and there. So I'm just going to put, just going to tin the ends of these little tacks. Just so that this makes it just a bit easier to solder the rail on. So just doing that a second. So let's just put a bit more. Sometimes it's handy just to flux everything, even if you've already done it. Just do it again. It's not going to. If you use this type of flux, it doesn't leave sort of corrosion marks like some flux do. Some fluxes are terrible. It just literally corrode the metal that you've worked on. But this stuff doesn't. It's very good. I'll have to try and remember the name of it so I can put in the video. But yeah, so we just put this very short section on, and I think in this bit I've actually put the fish plate on after, but it's easier to put the fish plate on obviously before you solder the rail down onto these tacks. And the advantage of using the tacks is that once you've soldered the rail on, you can then push the third rail even further down, because ideally you want it below the level of the outer tracks. to give you, so you still got contact with the pickup on the locomotive, but it's not creating a load of resistance, which makes the locomotive run less well. So I'm just popping that bit of solder in now. Just let me do that a second. The other very useful thing about fish plates is that you can actually solder your dropper wires onto the bottom of them, and then obviously drill a corresponding hole in the baseboard. It's kind of important around points and things where you need to either jump the power across, or provide an isolation, or send it to like a three-way switch, so you can change the polarity of the point if you need to, or if you want to shut a section of track down. I'm trying to keep the wiring on this as absolutely simple as possible. The previous attempt that I made it way too complicated. I ended up with a massive switchboard, which really I don't think was necessary. I mean, if you've got more than I've got about 5 controllers I can use on this layer at the moment, and as long as you set them up properly and isolate each section, as long as when you're moving the train from one section to another and they're both controllers are set the same, so the same direction and the same amount of power, then the train should smoothly transition between the sections, different sections of the rail, as it passes from one controller to another. Well, that's the theory anyway. We'll be testing that out in another video. These are quite old controllers, so like H&M controllers. I think I've got old Hornby Jubilo ones, but they're pretty sturdy, and even if you sort of make a mistake, they will just sort of shut down and then they work again. But I probably will get them properly checked out by someone who's a bit more expert than I am to make sure they're safe to use. Probably a really good idea to use a residual current device just to protect. As I was saying, RCD just protects yourself and the rest of the circuitry in your house. So now I'm just putting a bit more solder on another one of these little tacks. And the other thing I need to do is to, so I'm just going to connect that piece up there. So that's the actual rail joint is quite handy because it does hold the rail in place as you go along the track. It holds it in place while you solder the next bit in. And the other advantage, of course, is because they're just on tacks, all you've got to do is slide the fish plate across, and then you can just lift out that section of track without damaging it if you need to get to it for any reason, or you need to move the track underneath. Whereas before I was using like a screw into the baseboard, and it was very difficult to kind of remove because you couldn't unscrew it because the track was soldered to it, obviously. But with this, the track and the tack all lifts out in one piece, which is very handy. So I've already soldered a bit of wire to the bottom of a N-gauge fish plate, so I'll be using that, popping a little bit just to form a dropper wire. I'm just soldering this bit of section of rail into place. So I'll just stick with that for a minute. Okay, so let the solder set. It should be nice and solid, hopefully. So there you can see the fish plate on the end of the rail, and there's the fish plate attached to a dropper wire. So it's just a question really of dropping the wire through the baseboard and connecting it up. So there we go, that's it. Another video. So thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one. All the best. Bye.